Hey everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about wave shaping and how to use it in your sound design and music production. So I'm going to be honest here. I think wave shaping is pretty underrated in music production, and I feel like it should be used quite more often because um, I'm going to be honest here. I haven't used wave shaping a lot since I have done research for this video. Up until now, I've actually realized how powerful it is and the different capabilities that it has in terms of saturation and fitting things into a mix. So, to start off, I'm just going to talk about how wave shaping actually works, and then we're going to get into some creative applications. So, I'm going to start off with a input signal. We're going to do a sine wave in Serum to start off with. That should work. I'm going to pull up M Wave Shaper and M Oscilloscope. These are two plugins from the free bundle that Miller Production offers. It comes with a bunch of different effects and plugins, and it's pretty good to have if you didn't check it out yet. So just to make sure, on this M Wave Shaper, normally it's turned on to 50% like this. Make sure it's just turned all the way up to have the full effect going on. And we can see from this M oscilloscope that we have a sine wave going on, clean, untreated sine wave. And we can see from M Wave Shaper that it's peaking at around minus 10 dB around. It's probably on a logarithmic scale, so it's probably different than that, but we'll just say it's at a certain dB level. I'm going to start with creating a point just at that peak level. And to start off with explaining how wave shaping works, we basically have two different ranges here. We have the horizontal range, or like the x-axis, and we have the y-axis. So this represents input to output level. So our x is input and our y is output. As we can see, with a linear line like this, the sound, the input coming in is the same as the output coming out. So all of the levels that are being fed through the wave shaper as an input is going to be the same in the output. Let's see what happens when I take this range over here and I start to bend it up like so. We can see that the waveform starts to get actually more soft clipped or saturated, and it's starting to resemble more and more like a square wave. Now, this is happening because, as you can see, basically everything that is reaching to negative 12 dB is slowly being pushed more loudly than it normally would. And it's kind of following the same kind of curve that you see in the wave shaper. It's kind of reflecting into the waveform itself. And if we do this the opposite way, we curve it down, we can see that all the peak levels that are below around negative 12 dB are starting to get pushed down more. And it's kind of having this exponential form. So that's basically the basics of wave shaping. And we're going to talk a little bit more about different curves that you can do. But for now, we're going to switch to Serum. All right, so we are now in Serum, and I'm just going to switch this to a sine wave real quick. Now I'm going to show you that you can actually use the same method of wave shaping in Serum. A lot of people don't know this, but in the distortion effect over here, usually where you would choose different types of distortions like tube, soft clip, hard clip, etc. There's actually something called X-shaper, or also known as cross-shaper. And this essentially allows you to create your own wave shaping curve. Um, in order to have this work, usually you would just put the drive all the way down, and this means that this curve will basically be the same as what you set here in the Shaper A edit. And edit B would basically mean that the drive is all the way up to 100 to have the full effect. So we're going to keep it at 0, and we're going to mess with Shaper A. Now, there is a quick distinction that I want to point out. The wave shaping output of this is not exactly the same as M wave shaper, and I'm going to show you guys why in a second. So I'm going to put out M oscilloscope here, and as you can see, we have the same clean sine wave that we had before. As I start to turn up this little curve here to bring it up, you can see that the output is not exactly the same as what you would do with a M wave shaper here. You can see that the output is kind of slanted in a way, so it's kind of being pushed towards the center compared to if you would do this with an actual wave shaper. It would be equal on both sides, but in the serum, it is not the same. While it may look like it's a drastic difference in the visual output of the waveform, what you basically perceive sonically is kind of negligible. So we're just going to continue with the wave shaper in serum, and it's pretty much basically the same thing. So we can just continue on. So what I want to demonstrate here is if we reset this back to what it was before. What you can start doing here is creating curves that are a bit more complex and would be something that you couldn't really achieve with a normal saturation plugin. And this is what I think is pretty unique about the wave shaper plugin, or the effect of using a wave shaper, is you could pretty much dial your own type of distortion. So you can create any kind of custom distortion, whether it would be symmetric or asymmetric. For now, we're just going to deal with symmetric distortion because it's easier to explain. But we can see that we can saturate the signal, bring it down, and we can start to add more points to create something that is much more complex. And what we're doing here is we're essentially adding more harmonics on top of our original waveform. Because if you remember, our original sound is just a sine wave. And if I pull up Pro Q3 here to show you guys the frequency spectrum, we get one single tone in our spectrum. But with our wave shaping enabled, we have all these different types of harmonics which are present in our signal. And this will change depending on our curve. So we can get a bunch of different timbral possibilities here, and this allows to have a lot of different flexibility options when you're doing different types of synthesis. I'm now going to demonstrate an application on how you could use this for kind of a dubstep-based kind of application. So I have this serum patch. This is just a pretty basic dubstep bass, and I'm going to show you guys what the patch is real quick before we get on to the wave shaping part of it. So this is basically the clean serum patch. It's basically just a sine wave with a couple extra harmonics added. Both of these are being volume automated by the LFO with a little bit of noise, which is being high passed. In this effects section, we're just adding a little bit of stereo width. We're adding a compressor after the distortion because, as you will see in a bit, the distortion kind of makes it a bit quieter, so we're just bringing that up with the compressor gain, and then we're adding a low-pass filter. This low-pass filter is pretty important because, as you will see, we're doing some pretty abrasive stuff with this wave shaper. So, oh, and by the way, if you want to hear what this sounds like with a fat rack, this is just a fat rack that I created. Let me know if you guys want something like this in a next video. I can probably explain it to you guys if you want to. It's just making the sound more fuller. So let's turn on the distortion, which is doing a bit of wave shaping, as you can see. So it drastically changes the sound. And basically what the principle here is if we just remove this peak right here for a second, we're basically inverting our ramp. So as you remember, in our usual wave shaper, our linear ramp is going from bottom to top, like so. But here our slope is inverted, so it's actually going from top to bottom. What this is doing is basically pushing everything that's usually the lowest of volume all the way up, and everything that's usually at the highest peak, like 0 dB, all the way down. So it's basically being inverted, and this has a huge timbral difference to our sound. It adds quite a bit of different flavor to it. Kind of makes it sound more squelchy. And the reason why we have this EQ is if we turn it off just for a second, you can hear that there's no dynamics at all. Everything is just being squashed to the top. So there's not much volume automation that's going on. So it just sounds like a static bass. So to bring more movement back, we add this filter. And it basically makes it sound better. So in this shape, we can start adding different peaks to make our bass sound different and more aggressive. And you can have a lot of different possibilities with changing the timbre of your sound. So it's pretty, it is pretty helpful in making like heavy basses like that, because not only can you use the different stock distortion types that Serum usually gives you, you can actually create your own distortion and make it sound more unique, which I find is pretty awesome. So next up on our list, we have this snare preset that I created. I'm going to turn off the wave shaper here just to show you guys what it sounds like. So pretty standard snare. I'm using my custom noise here. This is basically just white noise but stereo, because originally Serum does not have any stereo noise samples, so I had to make my own. Anyways, this is just being fed through a high pass filter. We have some EQ going on here, a bit of compressor gain to make it louder, and a high pass filter, which is just being controlled by the same envelope that is doing the volume. So I'm going to turn on the wave shaper, and you're going to hear a huge difference, or not a huge difference, but you're going to hear a noticeable difference. So first of all, it sounds louder. That's because it's, being distorted. Um, it also sounds like it's being saturated a little bit. You can hear the kind of loud bit of the snare, so the transient and the body be a little bit more louder, more saturated. And with that, we have a little inverse curve going on. So we're actually making the more quieter parts of the snare, so the part after the body, a little bit quieter, but also a bit crunchier. So the thing with doing inverse curves like this on more complex waveforms like a snare is that it's going to make the waveform sound more crunchy, I could say. So in this example here, you can hear it a little bit in the top end of the snare. As you can hear beforehand, it's more sustained. And now it's shorter, it's a bit snappier, and it's a little bit more crispy. If I turn this down more, you can really hear the top end of that snare just being crunched down. And it almost sounds like you're running it through Ableton's Redux with the bit depth over here. But this just really helps with making the snare sound tighter, and it also gives it a bit more texture. So you can use wave shapers kind of in a drum context too, which is pretty interesting. And what I'm going to show you with this next example is that you can actually use it on drum breaks, not to make it sound crispier like this, but to actually make it sound louder and more full, especially with the room mics of a drum break sample. So now we're going to see how to use wave shapers in context of drum loops like drum breaks. So I'm going to pull up a drum loop right here. This is a good kind of breakish type loop. This works mostly if you can actually hear the room mics and it's not being overly chopped. Like say if you put a gate on it. You can hear kind of the room and the individual drum hits to its fullest. So we're going to pull up a wave shaper here as usual. Make sure to put the dry wet all the way up. So I'm going to start off with kind of explaining the technique of using hard clipping and soft clipping. So as you can see right now in this waveform, it's kind of rounded off in a way. In the snare, you can kind of see the waveform fluctuating up and down, and it's reaching a certain peak level. But what you can do with hard clipping is you can actually take this part of like the waveform, the top and bottom, and bring it closer and closer to 0. And what it's going to do is it's going to kind of chop off the tops, and it's going to make it sound a bit like crispier and more rough around the edges. But this is usually good if you want to do, like if you want to achieve maximum loudness in your masters. Using clippers can really help with that. Just taming those peaks down and making it sound more consistent. So I'm going to demonstrate how to use this with a wave shaper. You can see that it's fluctuating everywhere from 0 dB all the way to silence. If I start to create a peak here, let's do it around 6 dB, let's say, and I bring this point all the way down, so everything from 6 dB, everything from negative 6 dB and above is going to be clipped down to negative 6 dB. So you can't really hear a difference. It's not really that noticeable yet, but if I turn up the input, you can kind of hear the transients being more distorted in a way. And if I resample this real quick, you can see a difference in the waveform. So in the first waveform, it's fluctuating a lot more. But in the second waveform, you can actually see that it's being more squarified. And that's a result of having the ends of the waveform being clipped down to negative 6 dB. So everything that's negative 6 dB and above is just being shaved right off. And it's negative 6 dB all the way through until it goes back down. So that's basically hard clipping. What you can do to make it sound less harsh, especially at like a higher value, higher input value actually, is you can take this point where it intersects and you can kind of bring this horizontally like this to kind of create a curve in the intersection. So basically what this is doing is it's making the clipper softer. So it's going to round off the edges instead of just completely clipping it off very sharply. So it makes it sound a little bit more softer than if you would just have a hard edge like that. So that's one thing. You can first clip off the sound, but if you want to make the sound, especially this drum break sound more full, what you can do is create another point, let's say around here, and you can start bringing up this curve over here. And what you're going to hear is it's kind of going to make like the room of the drum break sound more louder, and it's going to make it fuller. So this is kind of in the same way as expansion. So if you know how compression works, expansion is kind of like the inverse of that. So it's basically going to take stuff that is quieter than the threshold, and it's going to bring it up. This is kind of the same thing in terms of wave shaping, but of course this is not a compressor because it doesn't have any attack or release settings, so that's why it distorts. But with a wave shaper, you can kind of replicate the same effect as if you did expansion by basically doing this sort of thing. So it's taking anything that's around negative 21 dB and lower, and it's boosting it up more than it usually is. You can kind of exaggerate this effect if you use another point here. But then at this point, it starts to sound very noisy, so we're just going to remove that. And essentially, it makes your drum break sound more full in a way, and a bit louder without it actually peaking up in decibels. Because if I demonstrate this real quick, while it may sound louder, the signal is actually quieter than the louder signal. And that is because this is actually more perceivably loud than it is demonstrated. Our peak values here on the original signal are louder, but here they're being squashed down and they're adding extra harmonics. And as we know, when we add more harmonics, it makes it sound quote unquote louder because there's more area in the frequency spectrum that's being used. So basically, you can use that to make your drum breaks louder, fuller, crispier, whatever you want to call it. You can also use it in parallel. So, for example, if I just create a chain here, and then we can have a dry signal going in. No wave shaper applied. Have another wave shaper. Let's create a little bit of a saturation curve here. Really drive this thing. We can do a little bit of EQing if we want to as well, just to kind of blend it in better with the original. Now, if we turn it on with the original signal, it makes it sound a lot fuller, which is another way you can do it. You can use it with parallel processing, or just do it with a single wave shaper, and both contexts work in different ways and may sound different or cooler depending on what you want to do. But it's two different techniques, and they're pretty useful in my opinion. Even with that, you can create another EQ and kind of use the side channel of this EQ to boost the stereo image of the drum break. So you're not making it sound only fuller, but you're also making it sound wider by accentuating the stereo width. With the wave shaper, you can get pretty abrasive results. It may not be suitable for your context, depending on what genre you're working on, but just knowing all of these techniques can be useful for when you do have to use these sort of sounds. And this kind of demonstrates that wave shaping is a lot more powerful than you may seem, and I find that it could be used a lot more in music production. And yeah, I hope you found this video useful, and I'm hopefully going to make more production tip tutorials like this soon. So if you like this kind of content, make sure to subscribe and like this video. And as always, I will see you in another video. Bye bye.